I became interested in this topic some 25 years ago at the University of Wisconsin, where I studied under Professor Minoru Kyoto, who was a specialist in Kukai and Shingon Buddhism. Under Professor Kyoto and Professor Buneman's guidance, I wrote my dissertation on portraits of the life of Kukai. And in that dissertation, I argued that there is no way to get to who Kukai truly was, as some scholars had said at the time and in a few decades before that. They believed that if you could go back to the first writings about Kukai that he wrote himself and that his direct followers who knew him wrote, that we could find out who Kukai really was. So at the time I critiqued that idea. You can never really know the mind of the person that you're studying. And later on, even though I wrote the dissertation on Kukai biographies, later on I came to realize that, as we often do when we write dissertations, that mine lacked in a lot of ways. I know that Joseph Kitagawa, who also studied Kukai, said that he wished he could go back into the library of University of Chicago and take his dissertation and all of the copies of his dissertation and burn it. And I understand his sentiment. I'm not quite that strongly opposed to my dissertation, but I do want to rework it, and this paper is somewhat of an attempt at that. Another thing that I'm really interested in is lived religions, which is kind of a growing trend within religious studies and in Buddhist studies. And lived religions have challenged some of the ways that we've done religious studies, and specifically in my case Buddhist studies, focusing primarily on doctrine. Shikoku is an island in Kansai, or western Japan, and it's the island where Kukai was born. Each year, thousands of pilgrims come from not only Japan but around the world, and it's been increasing in popularity, at least before COVID-19. The prefectures of Shikoku have joined together in hopes of having the pilgrimage recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This picture you can see on the right there, the people dressed in white, and this is important because it's pilgrimage attire, similar, you might say, to pilgrims in the Hajj that dress in white. And this white represents death to your ego self, which aids in the identification of pilgrims as living embodiments of Kukai himself. Kukai himself is also said to still be living, even though we've seen that his dates are the 8th century and early 9th century. Kukai is said to have entered a deep samadhi meditation state, and that he is in state in a mausoleum at Mount Koya in Japan. Once a year, Shingon priests take a change of clothes to the Okono-in, which is the inner chamber of Kukai mausoleum, where Kukai is in Nyujo, which is long-term samadhi, or Nyujo literally means entering samadhi. This idea that Kukai is still alive enters the walking biography of Kukai in the Shikoku pilgrimage in a lot of ways. And one way that it does so is many pilgrims have reported seeing Kukai, especially in times of trouble when they've hurt themselves or they're lost their way or they've become discouraged because of the hardships of the pilgrimage. Many pilgrims over the years have reported that Kukai has appeared to them and helped them in those times. In terms of biographies, the earliest information we have on Kukai was written by Kukai himself. In several documents, he makes short references to his childhood, his upbringing, his education, his esoteric Buddhist training, and so forth. In his 21-article will, written at the end of his life, Kukai says that in youth he was called Totomono, which means precious one, although today it's popularly believed that his name as a child was Mao, which means true fish. This name Mao seems to appear for the first time in Kobo Daishi no Koden, which is the broad diary of the great master of Koya-san, dated 1118. Kukai also says that at 15, he received instructions from his uncle Ato Atari on Confucian classics. At 18, he entered the National University at the capital, probably Nagaoka, although he doesn't specify where the capital is, and he studied Confucianism along with other aristocrats who were planning to go into government service. He read widely and became especially interested at that time in Buddhist writings. He says that he told himself that these writings about Confucianism were not beneficial in life or death. So after a while, he dropped out of college because he said he wanted to learn higher truth. Kukai became a lay Buddhist and practiced asceticisms in the mountains of Shikoku. In his partly fictional work called Indications of the Deaf and Blind, Kukai said that he was taught the Dharma of remembering what is heard, which is a mantra that's repeated 1,000,000 times in order to improve your memory. And he says that he climbed Mount Tairu in Awa in Shikoku, and that he heard the reverberation of the sound of his voice as he recited, and the planet Venus appeared in the sky. From that time on, Kukai says, I despised fame and wealth and longed for a life in the midst of nature. Taiyo means great dragon. This is near Temple 21 on the Shikoku pilgrimage route today. And there's a number of dragon images, including one that supposedly miraculously appeared in the floorboards of the temple. There's a lot of ways to access it, including climb the mountain yourself, but there's also cable cars there that you can take up to the top to the temple. And this is where a very well-known image of Kukai sits on the mountaintop overlooking the valley. And if you walk the pilgrimage route, you can see the statue of Kukai. Another kind of biography of Kukai are those written by people who knew him. A famous example of this is the biography of Sozu Kukai written by his close disciple Shinzai. That document says, he became a Buddhist layman and for some time went along to engage in ascetic practices on the precipices of famous mountains and in the innermost recesses of lonely valleys surrounded by steep cliffs. Once, while he was meditating atop Mount Tairu in Awa, the great sword of Akashagarbha Bodhisattva came flying towards him. Thus, the Bodhisattva showed his own mystical powers in response to Kukai's austerities. Another time, while Kukai was meditating with closed eyes, the planet Venus entered his mouth. The Bodhisattva had revealed to him the Buddha's supernatural power. In winter, when the snow fell heavily, Kukai's hardships were great. He disciplined himself by exposing his body to the elements, clad in cloth made of arrowroot. In summer, he practiced repentance day and night, all the while eating no grain at all. So these are the kind of stories that we hear from Kukai's own writings that enter his biography in Shikoku, where pilgrims can visit those areas, and if not, do the meditation itself, which is very rare since it's repeating a mantra 1,000,000 times that takes a very, very long time to do. Then they can experience at least something of Kukai's biography by going there and seeing where he was and seeing the images and statues of Kukai there, as well as walk the mountains now considered sacred that Kukai himself walked. Another type of biography of Kukai that appeared later can be seen in the example from the year 1319 of the Kobo Daishi Gyojo Zue, which is an illustrated biography of the great master of Mount Koya. This is a kind of biography that appeared in the Kamakura period, and it shows miraculous events. And maybe some of the miraculous events it depicts are supposed to rival the new Pure Land school. So, for example, now we have biography of Kukai showing his auspicious birth, some miraculous events that happened when the Buddhas appeared in his childhood, and the famous story of Kukai throwing himself off a mountain and asking the Buddhist angels, you might say, to bear him up if he's meant to study Buddhism. This is near Temple 73 today along the pilgrimage route. I'd like to switch focus now just a little bit to some practices in Shingon Buddhism, particularly those practices that are undertaken by monastic Buddhists. Shingon Buddhism is esoteric Buddhism, or Mikyo in Japanese, mysterious transmission of the Buddha Dharma. It relies on mudra, mantra, and mandala, and each of these are paired to one of the three mysteries it's called in Shingon Buddhism. That is the body, which is with the mudras, you make certain mudra hand gestures, and so your bodies are doing the same movements that you see the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas doing as depicted in the mandala. There is the mind, so you focus on the mandala and the images of Buddhas and bodhisattvas in the mandala, and you imitate those Buddhas with the sound of your voice and with your body posture and the mudras. And then there is mantra, and mantra is speech. So these are the three mysteries, the mystery of the body, the mind, and speech. And a mantra is a sound or a series of sounds. The sound itself and the vibration of the word is supposed to condition the body and the mind so that you attain a higher vision or a higher understanding of the works of yourself, your mind, and the world around us. In particular, Shingon practitioners use two mandala, the Garbhadhatu mandala or the womb mandala, and the Vajradhatu mandala, which are considered female and male, knower and known, respectively. Because Shingon wants to unite all dualities in your mind, one of the objects of studying the mandala and practicing with a mandala is to unite these two realms, the male and female realm, so that you get a vision of unity. At the center of the Garbhadhatu, or the womb mandala, is Dainichi nyorai, or Mahavarachana Buddha, and he's making a mudra that is the unity mudra that shows the male symbol inside the female symbol, which you might know from the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, which means the jewel is in the lotus. And again, it's a symbol of unity of all dualities of the universe. Elizabeth Ten Grotenhaus and others have written about Japanese mandala, and one of the things that she said about it is pointing to the fact that Kukai laid out a plan for Mount Koya temple complex on the basis of the Garbhadhatu mandala, with Kongo Buji temple at the center where Mahavarachana would be. And the landscape itself, with the mountains around Mount Koya, are the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that appear in the Garbhadhatu mandala. So the landscape itself is mandala and is the Buddhist practice. The central Buddha in the Garbhadhatu mandala, who is Dainichi nyorai, the great sun or the great illumination, has all the characteristics of Buddhahood that the practitioner wants: wisdom, compassion, perseverance, reserve, all of those things that you would want in your daily life. So this is not a historical Buddha, it's a cosmic Buddha, and it's a representation of the Buddha's Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, and the ideas that you want as a Buddha to become a Buddha. Surrounding Dainichi nyorai or Mahavarachana are Buddhas in the directions called jinas, and then between the Buddhas are bodhisattvas. And each of these has a characteristic of the central Buddha. So the Buddha's wisdom, the Buddha's compassion, and other attributes that the practitioner wants to get in his or her life. So what you do, there's a lot of ways to navigate the mandala, but one of the ways that you would do it is when you're initiated into the Garba mandala realm, you would throw a flower onto the mandala and start at that point where the flower landed. So if your flower lands down here at Amida Buddha in the west, you meditate on Amida Buddha's compassion, and the bodhisattva that flanks Amida Buddha is Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva of compassion. And so you start working, if that was the case, you would start working on your compassion in daily life. You would sit in front of the mandala and look at Amida Buddha, and you would assume the position of that Buddha, assume the mudra of that Buddha, the hand gesture, and you would chant the mantra while you try to get compassion into your life. And as time goes on, you would navigate this mandala by moving on to the next bodhisattva or Buddha, and then you would meditate on the position. You would get in the position of that Buddha, you would get in the hand gesture, the mudra of that Buddha, you would chant the mantra of that Buddha, and you would try to get the attributes of that Buddha, such as wisdom, into your life. So this is how you navigate a mandala in Shingon Buddhism until you get all of the attributes, and once you have all of the attributes, you become the Buddha in the center. You reach Buddhahood. So just like light, so he's the Buddha of light, he's Dainichi, the sun Buddha. Just like light has all of the colors of the spectrum in it, so does Mahavarachana have all of the attributes of the surrounding Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And just like light has a frequency and each color has a frequency, the mantra has a frequency, but the central mantra is the frequency of all of them, just like the central light has the color of all of them and the vibrational frequency of all of them. That mantra in the center is Ah, the sound Ah. Likewise, as Mahavarachana or Dainichi Nyorai, the center Buddha, is the universe, the surrounding Buddhas are the attributes of the universe, that is, the great materials, earth, wind, fire, air, and water, and each of those has a vibrational frequency and a sound. In Japanese pronunciation of the mantra, it's Ah, which is the central Buddha, Ah. Abhira Kan. Not only do these sounds have frequency and color, but they also have shapes, and this is the shapes of Abhira Kan illustrated in a series of burial mounds or headstones at Mount Koya near where Kukai is in state. These shapes also appear upside down under the ground, so the same size and shapes you see here are buried underneath. This is also an illustration of when you die, you return to the great elements. Returning to our topic of Shikoku now, hiking around the perimeter of the island of Shikoku is also going around the mandala. Shikoku itself can be considered a mandala. Accordingly, pilgrims know that when you go around Shikoku, you go through 4 dojos that correspond roughly, but not completely, to the 4 prefectures of Shikoku. The first dojo from Temple 1 to Temple 23 up here is the Hoshin area, which is the awakening of faith. This is a time when pilgrims who start at number 1, and you don't have to start at number 1, just like on the mandala, you don't have to start in any particular order. But if you do start at number 1, pilgrims say that they experience something like when they first went there, they just wanted to hike or see what was going on there in Shikoku with this pilgrimage. But after doing it for a little while, they start feeling something. They feel like maybe this is a worthwhile practice that might actually help me in my life sometime. The second dojo from temple number 24 to temple 39 is along this long route here by the Pacific Ocean, and there's less temples clustered together, so you're going to hike a lot longer before you come to a rest place. You're also going to find less convenience stores and other rest areas in this place. So it really is a place of austerities and discipline. But that is worth your while, because now you've developed this kind of awakening of the mind, the Hoshin. The third dojo is the dojo of Bodhi or Bodhi. This is where some people say attain enlightenment or awaken the Bodhi mind, the mind for enlightenment. This is something that takes place in the pilgrim's journey only after awakening the mind, the Hoshin section, and undergoing the austerities. And after all of this time that it took to do this and all of the practice, the austerities that you went to, you start attaining some kind of higher state of consciousness, allegedly. And then the fourth dojo, from 66 to Temple 88 to the end, and it's not really an end because, you know, it's a circle, so you can go, you can start at any point and go around it, or you can do it the other way. You can do it counterclockwise, which is supposed to be even more austerities if you do it that way. But the last dojo is the Neihan or the Nirvana section, which you might say is the Sokushin Jo Butsu section, that is, becoming a Buddha in this body or death. So Sokushin Jo Butsu has meant both becoming a Buddha in this body, as the kanji implies, but also it means death, or death to your material self. We might also relate these four dojos to the four directional Buddhas of the Mandala. So in these ways, Shikoku is a transversing of the Mandala, just like we saw with the Garba Dhatu Mandala. We could say the same with the Vajra Dhatu Mandala, which is a series of 9 mandalas that are positioned side by side or around a larger drawing, which you would also traverse in the same way. But the Shikoku pilgrimage itself, pilgrims receive the same kind or realize the same kind of attainments that you would realize if you would have a mandala that you were doing these practices with. But instead of the central deity, you might say, if we can use the word deity, the central figure being the great sun or Dainichi nyorai or the Buddha Mahavirachana, it is Kukai. So Kukai becomes the central figure of the Shikoku pilgrimage. Pilgrims carry an image of Kukai, which is the walking staff. So it's called the kongo zue, which means the Vajra stick. So it's kind of, you might even say it's a magic wand in a sense, because you have this kind of stick or wand that you carry with you. And you're supposed to carry it at all times as a pilgrim. Don't forget it, and it is easy to forget, to leave it at one temple and start walking away towards the next and realize that you don't have your kongo zue and you have to go back and get it. But it is a embodiment of Kukai, just as the pilgrim, him or herself, embodies Kukai. And people will come out of their houses or their shops or elsewhere and oftentimes give pilgrims alms. And this is because they're not only supporting you and building merit by supporting your pilgrimage, but they're also giving alms to Kukai because you're an embodiment of Kukai. So that's part of the whiteness of your clothes, the death shroud, you might say, that the pilgrim wears. You're dead to yourself and you have become an embodiment of Kukai. The top of the kongo zue, or pilgrimage walking stick, has these Sanskrit characters on them, and it is those sounds, Abira Umkan, that we talked about before. This is the earth, wind, fire, air, and water, the elements of the universe. Most of the time, pilgrims don't see this, even though they're carrying it with Kukai as the kongo zue, because it's covered with the handle that the walking stick that the pilgrim holds onto. And that is because this is kind of a grave, you might say, just like the graves at Mount Koya. It's Kukai's grave. So you keep it covered up just like you keep the grave covered up with dirt. Another indication of the pilgrim's oneness or embodiment of Kukai is the famous saying, or you might say the motto of the pilgrimage, Dogyo Ninen, which means same practice, two people. And this means that you are doing the practice of Kukai by doing this pilgrimage. Again, to sum it up and conclude, I believe that the Shikoku pilgrimage is a type of living biography of Kukai and a new type of biography of Kukai. It's a lived religion that it's still developing now, and Kukai has replaced Mahavarachana in the center of the mandala, and pilgrims become Kukai by participating in traversing the mandala, just as you would become Mahavarachana, the Buddha, by going around the mandala and incorporating the attributes of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around the central figure of Mahavarachana.